For centuries the Drak Empire had ruled the galaxy through strength and sheer brutality. They were an ancient race of reptilian conquerors, towering figures covered in thick obsidian black scales, their eyes glowing like molten gold. To the countless civilizations they had subjugated, the Drak were nothing less than harbingers of doom. Their war fleets spanned thousands of star systems, their soldiers known for their relentless discipline and merciless efficiency. No enemy had ever repelled a full-scale Drak invasion. None had ever survived to tell the tale. From their homeworld of Drakthal, nestled deep within the galactic core, the Drak had expanded outward, leaving behind a trail of shattered worlds and enslaved populations. Empires had crumbled beneath their advance, their histories erased, their cultures assimilated or extinguished. Their doctrine was simple: the strong ruled, the weak perished. It was the natural order of the universe. It was this unshakable belief that led them to Sol, the system that housed a small blue planet known as Earth. To the Drak it was just another prize, another conquest to add to their growing dominion. Yet what they did not know was that this unassuming world would be the beginning of their greatest nightmare. The Drak were always looking for new worlds to subjugate, their scouts tirelessly scanning the edges of explored space for resources, strategic positions, and civilizations ripe for conquest. When a routine reconnaissance mission stumbled upon Sol, it seemed laughable at first. Earth was a backwater planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, its technology barely touching the edges of interstellar travel. To an empire as vast as the Drak's, it was less than a speck of dust. Admiral Zarek, one of the Empire's most decorated commanders, reviewed the data personally. The humans were primitive compared to the other species the Drak had crushed. Their military capabilities were laughable. No planetary shields, no interstellar defenses, no fleet capable of standing against the sheer might of the Drak Armada. Their civilization was fractured, divided by nations and internal conflicts. Their people still waged war against one another over meaningless lines drawn on maps. It would be an easy conquest. Zarek had led campaigns against mighty star nations, civilizations that had constructed orbital defense grids, fleets numbering in the tens of thousands, and weapons capable of turning planets into dust. None of them had survived. What chance did Earth have? With a cruel grin, Zarek made his decision. From the depths of the Drak homeworld, war engines roared to life. The Empire's vast military might was mobilized, warships assembling in the darkness of space, forming a force that had shattered galactic superpowers. 20,000 warships were readied for the invasion. An overkill force, but Zarek did not believe in leaving survivors. The flagship of the fleet, the Iron Fawn, was a dreadnought of unimaginable power. It was a fortress in space larger than some moons, bristling with weapons that could annihilate entire continents in a single strike. Accompanying it were battlecruisers, destroyers, troop carriers, and world breakers. Colossal siege ships designed to bombard planets into submission. Across the Empire, warriors prepared for war. The Drak Legion, a force of 2 million battle-hardened soldiers, stood ready in the troop carriers, their razor-sharp talons clenching their plasma rifles, eager for battle. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were the finest of the Drak, genetically engineered for war, relentless and without mercy. As the fleet moved into formation, a silence fell across the war bridge of the Iron Fang. Zarek gazed at the star charts, his claws tracing the path to Earth. His eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Send the transmission," he ordered. As the fleet crossed the vast darkness between stars, an ominous message was transmitted toward Earth, a simple, chilling declaration of the inevitable. "This is Admiral Zarek of the Drak Empire. Your world has been chosen for conquest. You will surrender immediately or face total annihilation. You have one planetary cycle to comply." It was a courtesy more than anything. The Drak never truly expected surrender. They had issued such ultimatums before, and they all ended the same way, with burning cities and corpses scattered across the ruins of once great civilizations. But as the transmission was sent, something strange happened. Earth did not respond. There was no desperate plea for mercy, no surrender, no threats, only silence. The Drak fleet continued its march towards Sol, cutting through the void like a great unstoppable wave. Days passed as they approached the outer edges of the system. Even as they drew closer, the silence from Earth remained unbroken. This was unusual. Most species, upon realizing the horror that was coming for them, panicked. Some attempted futile resistance, some tried to flee, others fell to their knees and begged for mercy. But Earth did none of these things. Zarek frowned. He didn't like uncertainty. He didn't like when things deviated from his expectations, but in the end it didn't matter. "Prepare the fleet for planetary bombardment," he ordered. If Earth would not surrender, it would burn. Just as the Drak fleet reached the outer planets of the Sol system, a single contact appeared on their long-range sensors. A ship, a lone vessel moving toward them at a slow, deliberate pace. It had no transponder signals, no markings of any known faction. It was a dark, angular thing drifting Through space with eerie silence, it was as if it had emerged from the void itself. The bridge of the Iron Fang fell silent. As the officers observed the readings, Zarek narrowed his eyes. "What is that?" His communications officer hesitated before responding. "Unknown, Admiral. It does not match any known classification. It's not broadcasting any signals." The crew exchanged glances. This was strange. A single ship alone, unresponsive. It was either a scout or some kind of desperate, foolish resistance. Zarek scoffed. "Destroy it." 3 battlecruisers moved forward, weapons charging, plasma cannons, railguns, and missile launchers locked onto the lone vessel. The Drak were not ones to waste time. This insignificant nuisance would be dealt with immediately. The order was given. The weapons fired. A massive barrage of energy erupted toward the lone ship, a devastating wave of destruction, more than enough to obliterate any known vessel of its size. And then, before the crew's eyes, the ship remained unharmed. As the smoke cleared, the bridge fell into stunned silence. The vessel had not dodged, it had not activated any visible shields, it had simply absorbed the attack as if it were nothing. Zarek felt a chill run through him. For the first time in his long and brutal career, an emotion he had never known gripped his chest. Unease. Something was terribly wrong, and for the first time the Drak had encountered something they did not understand, something they could not explain, and soon they would come to know. Fear. The Virian fleet, once a symbol of absolute power, was now in chaos. Admiral Kaver clenched his mandibles in frustration as he watched ship after ship vanish into nothingness. The black human warship moved with unnatural precision, appearing and disappearing like a phantom. It was as if the void itself had birthed a reaper sent to punish the Varians for their arrogance. "Emergency retreat!" Kaver barked, his voice strained. "All ships engage warp drives." But deep down he knew the truth. Running would not save them. The enemy was not bound by conventional rules of space and war. The remaining Virian warships scrambled, their engines roaring to life, trying desperately to escape, but the human vessel was relentless. It did not pursue with reckless abandon. It hunted with calculated patience. One by one the fleeing ships vanished as the crimson beam struck them. There were no explosions, no wreckage. Just empty space where proud warships had once stood. Kaver turned to his second-in-command, Threx, whose usual composure was gone. "What do we know about this ship? How is it doing this?" Threx's trembling fingers danced over his console, but the data yielded no answers. "Admiral, we have nothing. Our sensors can't penetrate its hull, our weapons can't touch it," and a sudden tremor rocked the unyielding Wrath as the black warship reappeared directly in front of them. It hovered silently, as if observing, waiting. A cold shiver ran down Kaver's spine. Never before had an enemy made him feel so powerless. The ship's presence alone was suffocating. But then the calms crackled again. The same synthetic, emotionless voice spoke. "You have trespassed, you have slaughtered, your judgment is here." Kaver's mandibles clicked together in fury. "We are the Virian Empire, we do not bow to lesser species." He turned to his crew. "Target that ship with every available weapon. If we are to die, we will die fighting." The unyielding Wrath, the pride of the Virian fleet, roared to life. Plasma cannons, railguns, and missiles fired in a relentless wave, converging on the lone enemy ship. The bridge filled with the glow of the massive energy surge, the sheer force of the assault distorting the very fabric of space. And yet, when the firestorm cleared, the black warship remained unharmed, unmoved, unstoppable. Then something even worse happened. The lights on the unyielding Wrath flickered, and for the first time in Virian history, their dreadnought's shields collapsed without warning. Threx gasped. "Admiral, our defenses, they just stopped existing." Kaver's breath caught in his throat. "Impossible, shields don't just vanish. What have they done?" Before Threx could respond, the warship moved faster than their sensors could track. It was suddenly alongside them, a predator circling its helpless prey. The crimson light flickered to life once more. A surge of panic spread through the bridge crew. Officers scrambled for answers, for any defense, but there was nothing left to do. The void outside the viewport darkened, and the human warship became little more than a black silhouette against the abyss. Then the ship spoke one last time. "You were warned." The crimson light surged forward, and the unyielding Wrath, the Virian flagship, the pride of the Empire, ceased to exist. The Virian fleet was in full retreat, but escape was proving impossible. The nameless human warship was relentless, moving through the void like a predator closing in on its prey. Virian warships warped away in desperation, their once mighty armada now reduced to a scattered collection of terrified survivors. But not all could flee. Some ships, their engines crippled or their warp drives malfunctioning, were left behind, stranded in the face of an enemy that defied understanding. Admiral Kaver stood rigid. On the bridge of his flagship, his mandibles grinding together, as he watched the horror unfold, every attempt to fight back had failed. The human ship was invulnerable to their weapons, impervious to their strategies. Its mere presence had unraveled centuries of Virian military dominance. Never had they faced an enemy like this. One that did not bargain, did not gloat, did not even communicate beyond its singular terrifying warning. The bridge crew scrambled, their once disciplined composure shattered. Reports flooded in. Virian warships disappearing one after another as if plucked from existence by the abyss itself. There was no explosion, no wreckage, just a void where ships had been. The weapons of the human ship defied physics, logic, and comprehension. "Sir, warp coordinates are locked in!" Captain Threx shouted, his voice trembling. "We need to leave, now!" Caver's claws dug into his command throne. "Not yet. Sir, we don't have time," Threx implored. "The fleet is crumbling." But Caver's mind was racing. If they fled without understanding what they were facing, the Drakari Dominion would be left defenseless. The humans had been dismissed as weak, as insignificant. If they had more of these ships, if this was not an anomaly, then the Dominion was facing extinction. Then, as if sensing his hesitation, the human ship acted. It ceased its slow, deliberate pursuit, and accelerated with terrifying speed. Within seconds it was upon them. The bridge lights flickered, the ship's energy readings going haywire. A deep synthetic voice echoed through their comms. "You were warned." The ship fired a single crimson beam lance through space. It struck the Virian battleship closest to them. The mighty vessel, armed with planetary siege weapons, simply ceased to be. The vacuum of space swallowed the place where it had stood, as if reality itself had erased it. Panic overtook the remaining fleet. Ships broke rank, fleeing in every direction, desperate to escape the inescapable. Some collided in the chaos, others overloaded their warp drives in a last-ditch effort to escape the battlefield. Caver's heart pounded. There was no strategy, no countermeasure. All that remained was survival. "Activate the warp drive," he ordered. "Get us out of here." Threx hesitated, as if expecting another command, one last order to turn the tide, but none came. With a grim nod, he slammed his palm against the console. A pulse of energy surged through the ship as the warp drive engaged. The last thing Caver saw before the viewport was consumed by the swirling maelstrom of hyperspace was the nameless human warship, still watching, still waiting, and he knew this was only the beginning. The Virian fleet limped back to their stronghold in the Ralvik system, a once glorious bastion of military might, now filled with shattered ships and broken warriors of the 20,000 warships that had begun the invasion. Barely a fraction had returned. The Dominion was in disarray. News of the battle, if it could even be called that, spread like wildfire. The high warlords of the Virian ruling council were livid, demanding answers. Caver stood before them, his once unshakable confidence eroded. He was not met with the respect and reverence he had once commanded. Instead, he faced anger, disbelief, and worst of all, fear. "You ran?" one of the warlords snarled. "You abandoned the fleet?" another accused. Caver clenched his jaw. "We did not face a fleet, we faced one ship, one human ship, and it tore through us as if we were nothing." Laughter erupted among the warlords, but it was forced hollow. "One ship?" a particularly burly warlord scoffed. "You expect us to believe that?" Caver leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "Do you think I am a coward?" The warlords fell silent. "I have crushed entire civilizations," Caver continued, his eyes burning with intensity. "I have led conquests that reshaped the stars, and yet this thing rendered everything we know about warfare obsolete. We fired everything we had. It was unscathed. It consumed our weapons, and its own weapons do not destroy, they erase." A heavy silence settled over the chamber. "Then what do you propose?" one of the warlords asked. Caver exhaled. "We need intelligence. We need to know what that ship is, where it came from, and how many of them exist. We should strike back now," another warlord declared. "Send every ship we have, and what?" Caver interrupted. "Watch as they vanish? No, this is not a fight we can win with brute force. We underestimated the humans once, we cannot afford to do so again." The warlords muttered among themselves, their pride warring with their survival instincts. Eventually the highest among them, war leader Tarkus, spoke. "We will not send another fleet, not yet," Tarkus said. "But you are right, we must understand what we are dealing with. You will lead a reconnaissance force to uncover the truth behind this human warship. You will learn everything there is to know about it." Caver nodded. He had survived the first encounter. Now he had to prepare for what came next, because one thing was certain: the war with humanity had only just begun. The Virian fleet was in shambles. What had once been an armada of over 20,000 warships poised to crush humanity was now a scattered and broken force. Wreckage drifted aimlessly through the void, the remnants of vessels that had dared to challenge the lone human warship. The silence was deafening. Not a single Virian dared to speak as Admiral Caver stood frozen on the bridge of his dreadnought, the unyielding wrath, his mandibles clenched, his reptilian eyes locked onto the viewscreen that displayed the ever-approaching human warship. It moved without hesitation, gliding through space like a predator stalking its wounded prey. There was no arrogance in its motion, no hesitation, no fear. It was a hunter, and the Varians were nothing more than its quarry. The crimson glow that had erased entire warships pulsed ominously on its hull as if it were waiting for them to make their next move. Status report. Caver barked, forcing his voice to remain steady. He could not afford to show weakness. Not now. His second-in-command, Threx, hesitated before responding. Admiral, the fleet is in disarray. Half of our remaining ships have fled into hyperspace. Those that remain are either too damaged to escape or are attempting to regroup. Our weapons, they have proven ineffective. Our shields are gone. Caver felt cold rage creep through his body. Never had the Varians faced an enemy like this. Every civilization they had encountered had been crushed beneath their might. They had burned planets, obliterated armadas, and subjugated entire species without effort, but this single ship had turned the tide of war in an instant. We cannot run, Caver growled. We must find a way to fight. We are Varians, we do not cower. Threx did not respond immediately. The silence stretched between them before he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral, this is not a battle, this is a slaughter. We are not fighting an enemy, we are facing something beyond our understanding. We must retreat. The words stung Caver like a blade. He wanted to refuse to rally his fleet and fight to the last, but the truth was undeniable. This was no ordinary enemy. This ship, this abomination, was something else entirely, and they were powerless against it. The human warship continued its relentless approach, its dark hull absorbing the light of distant stars. It was close now, too close. The time for hesitation was over. Send out a transmission, Caver ordered. Open a direct channel to the human vessel. Threx's eyes widened in shock. Admiral? Do it! The communications officer hesitated only a moment before nodding. The channel was opened, and for the first time since the battle had begun, Caver spoke directly to the enemy. This is Admiral Caver of the Virian fleet. We wish to negotiate. For a long, dreadful moment there was only silence, then a voice, cold, synthetic, and without emotion, responded. Negotiate? Caver took a steadying breath. Yes, we acknowledge your strength. We have underestimated humanity, but surely you understand that war benefits either of us. Let us find another way. The human warship did not respond immediately. The silence was suffocating. Then at last the voice spoke again. You did not seek peace when you entered our system. You came to conquer, you came to destroy, and now you beg for mercy? Caver's mandibles tightened. It was a mistake, one we are willing to correct. There is no honor in extermination. Let us retreat, and we will never return to human space, this I swear. The voice was silent for another long moment before it responded with a single word, no. Before Caver could react, the human warship moved. It accelerated in an instant, closing the distance between itself and the unyielding wrath. In the blink of an eye the crimson glow on its hull flared to life, and Caver knew with absolute certainty that his time had come. All hands brace for impact! He roared, but he knew it was futile. The beam fired. The last thing Admiral Caver saw was the terrible, all-consuming light before the unyielding wrath was no more. The Virian fleet was in ruins. The once mighty armada that had conquered entire civilizations now drifted in shattered pieces across the void. What remained of their forces scrambled to escape, their commanders abandoning all notions of victory. Fear had gripped them completely. The unknown human warship had done the impossible. It had broken them, mind and spirit. Admiral Caver sat motionless on the bridge of the unyielding wrath, his body trembling with disbelief. He had fought in 100 wars, crushed a dozen empires, and stood unshaken before countless enemies. Yet now, he felt something alien in his gut, terror. His mind struggled to comprehend what he had witnessed. The human vessel had destroyed Virian warships not with brute force, but with an ability that defied logic. Their weapons had been useless. Their defenses had been erased. It was not war. It was annihilation. Across the Virian channels, frantic voices clamored for leadership, for guidance, for salvation. Cavern knew the truth: there was none. The human warship was toying with them. It had shown restraint, but he suspected that restraint could end at any moment. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to run and never look back. But then the transmission came. The same deep, synthetic voice that had spoken before now echoed through every surviving Virian vessel. Your time is over. Surrender or be erased. Surrender? The very thought was unthinkable. The Varians did not surrender. They fought to the last breath. It was their way, their code. But as Cavor looked at the remains of his fleet, at the helpless dread filling the eyes of his crew, he realized there was no other choice. With a slow, defeated motion, he pressed the command console before him. His mandibles clenched as he forced the words out. This is Admiral Cavor of the Virian Empire. We surrender. Silence fell over the bridge. His crew stared at him in shock. Some seemed ready to protest, but none dared to speak. They knew what he knew. This was survival. Nothing else mattered. A few tense moments passed before the human vessel responded. Acknowledged. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with elimination. The command was carried out across the surviving ships. Weapons powered down. Engines ceased movement. The once glorious Virian fleet, reduced to scattered, broken survivors, now awaited the arrival of their new masters. Minutes later, smaller human ships emerged from the darkness, moving toward the Virian vessels with an eerie precision. They bore no markings, no indication of rank or allegiance. They were as silent and mysterious as the warship that had destroyed them. The boarding parties arrived with cold efficiency. The Virian soldiers, once proud warriors, did not resist. They knew it was futile. The humans did not waste words. They took control of the ships, securing every corridor with speed and precision. Cavor watched as his own bridge was overtaken by faceless soldiers clad in black armor, their weapons unlike anything he had ever seen. One figure stepped forward, its visor reflecting the dim emergency lights of the bridge. Admiral Cavor, you are now a prisoner of humanity. Your war is over. Cavor let out a slow breath. His war was over. The Virian Empire had been humbled, not by diplomacy, not by attrition, but by a single ship that should not have existed. As he was led away in chains, he cast one last look at the viewscreen. The human warship remained motionless, observing like a god that had judged them and found them unworthy. Its black hull absorbed the light, a void in the fabric of space itself. Cavor finally understood. Humanity was not weak. They had never been weak. They had simply hidden their strength until the moment was right. And now, the galaxy would never be the same again.